Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm honoured to stand here and rise and speak on Bill C-29, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22nd, and other measures as well. I had spoken about this budget initially when it was tabled, and at that time I was very concerned with the numbers that I had seen and the spending that I was seeing. But today I'm even more concerned, especially where we have seen the lack of growth and the lack of support, and a number of groups jumping off the bandwagon saying they're not doing what they said they would do. When this bill was initially tabled, there was $113 billion that was being borrowed, and TD Economic Services has now estimated that there's going to be an additional $16.5 billion of new expenditures. But let's go back to what this government had promised during the 2015 election. 2015 election was truly just a year ago, and we have seen so many changes from what this government is delivering compared to what they were providing in their platform. And I'd like to go back to a debate that I had in the city of St. Thomas. There were 6 candidates, and I recall the Liberal candidate at that time, it was one of our final debates, and I recall her saying that we will have shovels in the ground by December of 2015. Now, obviously, I am here, and I'm very grateful for that, but she obviously heard that as part of the platform. She was being told by the leader and by the leaders of the party that they were going to be in the ground doing great work for Canadians and building infrastructure. And, you know, I think they actually believed it. And I believe many of the members that are now sitting across in the government side believed that when they came here, that they were going to be doing some good work. But as I said, that was December of 2015 where this promise was to have shovels in the ground. And I can tell you, I haven't seen too many shovels in the ground. I haven't seen these projects that they're talking about that they're going to be working on. The infrastructure minister will come out and talk about the projects that have been proposed, the projects that the provincial governments have submitted, saying, yes, we are going to support these projects. But that is only stage 1 of this process. And that means that there's only a finite number of people that are actually working on this infrastructure build. It may be the architects, it may be the engineers, it may be the administrative people that are putting in these applications. But it is not the people that are out there with the hard hats and the work boots doing that work. We do not see that happening yet. So I ask, out of all of these communities and provinces that were promised in the 2015 campaign, more roads and better infrastructure, where is this and where is the spending? We have seen spending from this government, but we haven't seen anything about it. And I go back to, you know, when you go to the bank and you're talking about good debt versus bad debt. And it's simple. It's something I say to my children. What is a bad debt and what is a good debt? A good debt is when you go and buy a washing machine because it's something that you need. And that washing machine is going to stay with you not just 1 day or 2 days. It's going to stay with you hopefully for 20 years, the way I like to buy my washing machines at least. And so that is a good debt. That's when we're investing into our home and into the things in our home. Going out and buying a gourmet dinner that might cost $200 or $300, that's good for 1 day, if that. It might be good for 3 hours. But there's the difference between good debt and bad debt. And I'm very concerned that this government doesn't know the difference between the two. That we're spending a lot of money for things that are there and are hot topics, but we're not spending on things, long-time prosperity. The Bank of Canada has actually lowered the forecast for the GDP down to 1.1%. And that hasn't even been within a year. That was 1.4% was forecasted in January prior to this budget. And unfortunately, the Bank of Canada is seeing the light as well and seeing that it's going to be 1.1%. And when this budget was tabled, it wasn't just organizations like C.D. Howe Institute or the Fraser Institute, but also the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, along with the members of the Conservative Party, that were very concerned with what was in that budget. But like I said at the beginning of the speech, we are seeing more groups, more organizations, and more individuals jumping on board saying, this budget is not delivering the stimulus that we thought it was going to. This is not what they have promised. This government is not promising what they said. And I think that's one thing is people are saying, yes, we cast out our vote in 2015, and like I say, we talked about 7 million compared to 6 million. Some of those people, 39%, casted a vote for the Liberal Party, and they're not, many of those people are sitting there with voters' remorse, saying they're not getting what they thought they had voted for. We now see the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and the Business Council of Canada all being much more skeptical of this spending being done by this government. But we're also seeing other groups, and this is one thing that I was really quite surprised with. We have a Prime Minister who talks about building relationships, and one of the key relationships he's going to have is with those persons from First Nations and our Aboriginals. But last week at committee, in the Status of Women Committee, we had the opportunity to listen to a lady by the name of Tracy O'Hearn. And Tracy was representing the Inuit Women of Canada organization. She talked about the work that they had done regarding violence against women, and they talked about their Phase 1, a program that was done through Phase 1 under the Conservative government. Now, Phase 1 had some fantastic results, but they are ready to initiate Phase 2. And in the last year, this government that is trying to build relationships with our First Nations people have not been there, not been part of this negotiations, and have truly in the last year not been at the table to communicate with them. So we're not seeing the progression where we've seen some great things started, but they're not all halted because this government has not been acting. So this building of relationships with First Nations is what we've seen as another broken promise. And I think we're going to see that our NDP, the NDP opposition has also had to put forward some of these concerns because we have a government that is not listening. They're promising but not listening. There was also confirmation by the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirming that the Conservative government left a $2.9 billion surplus the 2015-2016 fiscal year. The government proposed to spend their way out of prosperity. We saw that if we're just taking the numbers out and not looking at what the Liberals were spending, that we did very, very well as a government. And what we're seeing is when this budget was proposed, we had a lot of economists saying deficits can be good. And in the previous session with the question that came from one of the NDP asking my colleague, was it right to have a deficit? Well, in 2008, 9, and 10, when we did go through the worst economic downturn that you could see, we actually spent wisely. We had shovels in the ground. We created retraining programs. We did everything we possibly could to get people back to work. And that is why we were one of the first countries that recovered from the economic downturn. But what we're seeing here is a government that's saying that they will spend their way to prosperity, something that seems to be okay because other economists have said, yes, you can go into deficit as long as you're spending it well. But we have not seen that spending well. So they're going into deficit and we're not seeing anything for it. Instead, we see that the people in Canada are floundering. We're looking at making employment insurance reforms and things of that sort, rather than trying to create jobs. Now, one thing I'm very proud of is actually being the critic for families, children, and social development. So in this last 2 minutes, I'm just going to touch on the changes to the child care or the Canada Child Benefit. Once again, in the election, it was all about 9 out of 10 kids will do better under their program. And you know something? I've done the numbers. There is lots more money being spent. I'm not going to say that there's not. But once again, we had a party that was out there selling something who had never took a pen to paper to see what the actual numbers were. There weren't true estimates done. And now what we're doing today is we continue to debate this bill C-29, where we're now indexing the CCB, because that was not done when they initially did it. And back in June or July, when these payments started, that was the first thing that the media caught on, was that the money was not being indexed, and the programs put through by the Conservative government were actually better programs than that we currently have by the Liberal government today. But now with the indexing, we are going to be having double the spending just for the child benefit. So double. So we're taking a program that's already very, very, very large and questionably sustainable, and we're going to be doubling that in the next 5 years. So that is what I think is just absolutely poor fiscal management. So we look at a variety of things, and I think this government, yes, there are going to be hiccups and there's going to be difficult things first year taking over a government. We understand that, but there seems to be no focus. It's about spending, 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 but not creating prosperity, not creating opportunities for Canadians. If a family has a problem, we'll give them more money. We're not going to give them opportunities to build, to educate, to have new roads. We're not going to do those things. We'll just throw money at the problem. And that is not what we're supposed to be doing here. We are in charge, this government is in charge of a country and is in charge of their finances, and I'm very concerned that those promises that they put in 2015 are extremely irresponsible, and I'm very concerned where we will see our government and where we'll see our country by the end of October of 2019. So I thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all the best for the day.
Yeah.
Question commentaire dans la députée de Sherbrooke.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et je remercie ma collègue pour son discours. J'aimerais lui poser une question par rapport à ce qui a été soulevé à quelques reprises déjà dans cette Chambre, la question des infrastructures. Et est-ce qu'elle a la même crainte que nous sur cette question-là, que finalement le 120 milliards qui était promis, elle en a mentionné dans son discours, que ça a été discuté dans sa campagne électorale locale, le 120 milliards d'infrastructures, est-ce qu'elle a une crainte que finalement, à cause que les finances publiques ne sont pas ce qu'ils étaient censés être pour le gouvernement est dans une voie pour pouvoir annoncer qu'il aura bel et bien dépensé le 120 milliards, mais qu'une grande proportion de ça va avoir été du financement privé en finançant par l'intermédiaire d'une banque d'investissement en infrastructure. Et donc, est-ce qu'elle craint qu'il pourrait y avoir ici un écran de fumée pour nous faire croire que finalement cette promesse-là a été remplie, mais qu'il y aurait une partie de ça qui finalement viendrait du privé?
The honourable member for Elgin Middlesex London.
Well, I thank you very much for the question, and I do believe in some sorts of infrastructure that there needs to be partnerships. When it comes to private businesses, if we're helping out there needs to sometimes be partnerships. But in this situation that you're referring to, the public infrastructure, the roads, the hospitals, the things that we see in Canada, where we have the provincial and territorial governments as well as the municipal governments, I am very concerned that they're going to back out of some of those. And like I said, I compare it to a washing machine. There's good and there's bad debt. If a road is built, we have that road for decades and decades, few repairs. I don't see that may be the spending that's ahead of ourselves, because we see that they have put themselves into a new position where we're expecting lower growth and not the revenues that this government thought they would have. So thank you very much for the question.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to continue on the line of infrastructure. You know, in the province of Alberta, where there's been a number of difficult times, and we've had a government that's moved in many different ways to try to help Albertans as they go through this difficult time, and we're very optimistic in terms of that Albertans who have a very strong spirit will not only get out of it, but they will do well into the future. But one of the ways in which they're going to be able to capitalize in terms of going well is because of this government's commitment on infrastructure. In fact, there are 72 projects in working with municipalities and the province that have already been approved to date. And I'm wondering if the member would recognize that through this infrastructure spending in working in cooperation with the province and municipalities, that all Albertans will directly benefit by it.
Honourable member for Elgin Middlesex London.
I thank the member, and I know he said he was listening to my speech as he was munching today, so thank you very much. But I think he missed a part of that speech where I said there's phase one, where it's the administrative part, where it's the people who are building the plans and all of those things. It's not the men and women who are going back to work with the hard hats and the work boots. So phase one does not incorporate. We may see these projects, but do we actually see shovels in the ground? Do we see how many of those projects, and maybe the member will have this conversation with me outside, but how many of these projects actually are shoveling, taking the dirt, and creating new opportunities? Or are these still architectural things where the provincial governments have said, yes, we're going to allow this, and the building's going to start in 3 to 4 months? So I think we have a question there because we really don't know how far they've progressed.
Questions and comments? The Honourable member for Richmond Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative government have cut taxes over 160 times to reach the lowest level in 50 years and allowed the average family to save $3,400 per year, and we still balance the budget. So my question to my honourable colleague is that what has the current government done, the damage they have done to our families regarding the taxes?
Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Well, thank you very much for the question. And, you know, I'm just going to compare what we had and what we don't have any longer. I'm a mom of 5. I've said that proudly many, many times. My children had memberships all the time up to the age of 18 at the YMCA. Those were things that I was able to use as fitness tax credits. My children play sports. My children, one does acting lessons. They all do different things. So in the previous government, there was that incentives to make sure that I could give opportunities for my children. This government has, in one hand, they're providing money through the child benefit and what they like to say is those middle-class tax cuts. And then the other hand, thank you, and the other hand, they're saying, well, here you go, here's your bill for your CPP, here's your bill for your carbon tax, and here's your bill for our $130 billion deficit. So, you know, it's really short-term prosperity with long-term debt.